Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about my favorite 5 albums for the month of September. Yes, it's that time of the month. Now, August was a very difficult month to put together a list, and September wasn't any easier. And because of that, there's a little bit of a surprise at the end. But before that, let's start off by chronological order of release as we always do. And we're starting off with Blind Guardian, The God Machine, out September 2nd on Nuclear Blast. This is the band's 12th studio album. They are a power metal, classic heavy metal band, and every time Blind Guardian announces that they're releasing an album, you always expect greatness. Now, I was expecting greatness, but I wasn't expecting the greatness to be this great, for lack of a better term. This album surpassed all my expectations. It's a great sounding record. It has great feel, great atmosphere. It creates incredible playability from the first all the way to the last track. You're fully engaged with the experience. You have ebbs and flows. The songs have their own DNA, their own fingerprint. They're not all blended in as one big track. The album really has enough character within the individual songs that allows the character of the overall record to shine through. Outstanding album by an outstanding band. The God Machine is a must listen for 2022. Next we have The Devil Wears Prada, Color Decay, out September 16th on Solid State.
A short drive, get me home. The cost is nowhere near to what I owe. From the back of the car, it's sinking in like a shot of fear and adrenaline. I'm a lost cause with nothing left. Can't you say that? My hands are torn up from all these broken bottles. I can't stand lost too much. I know I've got my...
This is the band's 8th studio record. They are a metalcore band, and this album kind of shocked me ever so slightly, or perhaps maybe not so slightly at all. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. That's a better description of exactly what happened the first time that I played this album. I was expecting this album to have some sort of a drive, some sort of a hit in terms of the power, the intensity, and the aggression that would put forward. But I wasn't expecting this album to be perhaps as introspective as it was, and I was definitely not expecting myself to feel as connected with that introspective experience as I did. Because of that, it's hard for me to put this album down, and it's hard for me not to talk about a top 5 albums of September without mentioning The Devil Wears Prada with Color Decay. This felt like the soundtrack of my life, or at least the life that I'm currently living in. At the very least, it felt like the songs that I would write about or that I would sing about if I was a musician, but I'm not. So I felt very represented throughout this entire record, not just from a soundscape point of view, but from a lyrical content, and perhaps more important in terms of how that lyrical content was delivered to me in the overall composition of the song. So magnificent album by The Devil Wears Prada. Color Decay really stands out in the crowd of so many metalcore records that were released this year. Next we have Wolfheart with King of the North, out September 16th on Napalm Records. This is the band's 6th studio record. They are a melodic death metal band, and this album shows you a different side of Wolfheart. You're going to get clean vocals, and I think that is the main attribute, the main difference, the main spark that changes your perception about the band and definitely impacts your perception on this record. I still feel like this album maybe had a little bit too much of those clean vocals, even though I really enjoyed it and I really like it. For an album that's trying to break away from its past and perhaps looking into the future, I would have liked that transition to be slightly more smoother than what it was and not as abrupt. Does it work? Of course it works. This album is phenomenal. It's definitely a step forward and upwards from their previous album. It has a lot more power. It has a lot more intensity. It has a lot more heart. It has a lot more of that Wolfheart in it. It feels more connected with what the band has done with the past, with that caveat of looking towards the future and including a lot more of those clean vocals. So great record all around by Wolfheart. Next we have Gaerea with the album Mirage, out September 23rd on Season of Mist. This is their third studio album. They are a black metal band, and this record is the culmination of the steps that they took with the two previous albums. This is a band that's getting better and better with every album, with every release, with every tour, with every notch that they add to their belt. The experience as a band and how they're growing as a band is really showcasing everything that they can do talent-wise. And this album perhaps is the climax of all of that effort, of all of that work. It really feels mature, a lot more mature than what the band is. It offers a lot more to the listener than the two previous records did. It's an album that feels polished at times because of how it's put together, the production behind it, but it's not overly polished. It still feels raw, it still feels dark, it still feels black, as any black metal album should. A band that's starting to set the table, or at least moving the table to adjust the bar of what black metal should sound like in 2022. There's a lot of bands that are starting to fall off of that table or fall off of the wagon as the wagon progresses and moves forward, and these guys are starting to put together a solid discography, and they put together a solid record that leaves you salivating for what the future could hold. Last but definitely not least, Darkest Era, Wither on the Vine, out September 30th on Candlelight Records. This is the band's third studio album. They are a dark metal band. I mean, that's how I'm going to define it based on this record. If you base it on the two previous albums, you're going to define it as something else. This is a band that had a hiatus between records, and that hiatus had an impact on how this album comes across, sound-wise, lyrically, and even from an overall atmosphere point of view. I like the darkness that the album holds. I like the doom elements that the album has. There's still some folkiness in their sound, but it's not a folk sounding album. It depends a lot more on that introspective darkness that permeates throughout the entire record, that hits every single element of the album, and the clean vocals that they put forward really set the tone for what that darkness is all about. Magnificent sounding record, a lot darker than I was expecting, a lot doomier than I was expecting, but a phenomenal album. One that allows you to sink into the record, but still find some light amongst all of that darkness. And that light is what keeps you coming back for more. It doesn't overburden the listener with too much heaviness, with too much darkness, with too much somberness. That light at the end of the tunnel is enough to keep you coming back for more and enjoying the progress that you have, the journey that it's put forward from the first all the way to the last song. Now, I know these are my top 5, but I have to mention Stratovarius with Survive. This album needed to be in this top 5. I'm making a top 6, but it has to be there because from a pure power metal point of view, this is one of the strongest albums of 2022. This band did an outstanding job, and they really revitalized a genre that I felt it was pretty much dying a slow death. This is an incredible record. They use all the elements that we've come to expect from a power metal band. They use a lot of keyboards on this record, not allowing the keyboards to drive the experience, to be the main focal point of the listener's attention, song in and song out, is the winning formula. This is what power metal should be all about, relying on vocals and guitars, using all the other elements to kind of make the sound feel more compact, to give more substance, to give more texture to that sound, but not defining it. I love this record. I had to mention it because it was so hard not to put it on this list. It's one of my favorites for 2022. So this is it. My top 5 plus 1 6 list for the month of September. Let me know your thoughts on these albums, on these bands, on your picks. Who would be on your list? Use the comment section below. I'll definitely be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.